A very good morning to all of you, and Mr. Mishra, thank you very much for this wonderful introduction. And I'm also very delighted to be partaking in the ICC annual initiative after maybe a gap of couple of years. And I'm very privileged to be hosting this extremely important session on sustainable chemicals management. So all of us who are involved in the chemical industry and even broader manufacturing industry, sustainable chemicals management, whether it is at the stage of production, at the stage of storage, transportation, or any waste and emissions that come out during the production process, and how do we manage that, mitigate that, becomes an extremely important aspect of how we do the business, and it is increasingly becoming very, very important in view of the fact that we have had accidents, in the chemical industries. If I may mention the most recent ones, the LG polymers and the Yashavasi Rasayan accidents, which actually happened because of wrong storage or probably not acceptable forms of storage or some mistakes there. These are examples. And every time this happens, the chemical industry gets a bad name. And when such things happen, this obviously leads to regulations, which we all, as an industry participant, wish to have lesser regulation, and we want self-regulation. And in the chemical industry has good examples of self-regulation. For example, many of us adhere to and promote responsible care, which is a great example of self-regulation of the chemical industry. Another great example in the Indian context is an initiative called as the Nicer Globe, which is an industry initiative to ensure that dangerous goods are transported safely on the Indian roads. And in the unfortunate event that something were to go wrong, the industry association gets together and really quickly responds to it with a collective, technical and logistic ability that the industry has. So these are examples of self-regulation. Notwithstanding that, I think a country like India, there are a number of regulations that govern the chemical industry at various stages. It starts from the factories of 1948 to the Poison Act of 1990 to gas cylinder rules of 2016, petroleum rules of 2002. The list is quite exhaustive. Now, many of these rules are very supportive of the industry or help guide the industry. For example, if I were to take an example, the PESO guidelines, they are very, very clear because they are very technical. They provide technical guidance to the industry. However, there are a number of other regulations which do not provide minimum technical controls and which do not serve as a guide for the industry, and they often tend to be just licenses that you need to take in order to conduct your business, and in the end, very often end up being very counterproductive to what regulation should actually be. More modern regulations are looking at not chemical specific regulations, but more are governed by the characteristics of the chemicals that you handle, either the moisture content or the pyrophoric ratio. So these tend to be the kind of characteristics on which regulations are based, and then they also provide technical recommendations on design, storage, etc. So we are also in the stage of evolving, and that's the context in which this particular session is being organized. And I must also say that we're also very fortunate with UN's SDG, the Sustainable Development Guidelines, which can actually be a very powerful guiding tool for setting up regulations as well. And we will hear expert speakers talking on all these different fronts. So I have the pleasure to have in our session today Dr. Vishal Chowdhury, who is the Deputy Industrial Advisor, Department of Chemicals and Petrochemicals, Government of India. He will be speaking on the rapidly evolving legal instruments for chemicals management in India, the draft CMS rules. We also have NKJ, Assistant Vice President, Environmental Excellence of Jubilant Life Sciences, a very experienced person in the industry on this topic. And finally, we have Joe Phelan, who is the Country Director of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, who will also talk to us about the outcome of Chemical Sector Roadmap and what Indian companies should be looking at. And he will actually refer to the SDG and how SDG can be a basis for good regulations. So with that, let me invite the first speaker, Dr. Vishal Chowdhury.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible? Thank you, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, Vishal.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. My warm regards to Dr. Raman, fellow speakers, all the invitees and all the participants. A very good morning to all. First of all, I would like to thank Indian Chemical Council for giving me this opportunity and to inviting me to speak on this platform. And I would also like to congratulate ICC for organizing this conclave so successfully. So, so on a very appropriate theme, and all the topics and the sessions are covered are really very relevant and most appropriate. So, just to begin with, just an introduction to chemical sector. Actually, chemicals are an integral part of our life, of lifestyle. From daily start, when we start our basic activities in the morning, from soap and toothpaste to night when we take coffee after dinner, everything is having chemical in certain composition. So chemicals are the integral part of ourselves actually. It is a highest raw material provider sector among all the sectors. Chemical sector plays a very important role in agriculture, automobiles, construction, textiles, healthcare, packaging. All the sectors, we are a raw material, this sector is a raw material provider and it plays a very key role. Basically, the presence of value chain across all the sectors and contribution towards GVA of the country among the different segments of chemicals, just to give an idea, specialty in organic chemicals through solvents explosive gives 15% contribution through public administration and defense services. Then through professional services, commodity chemicals, we have 21%. Agriculture, forestry and fishing, we have agrochemicals, fertilizers and pesticides around 16% contribution. Then in manufacturing, all the commodity chemicals are required. These have around 17 to 18% contribution in the GVA. So we can see the importance of the sector and how crucial the sector is for all the other segments. Just again to give an idea of the importance of the sector, Indian chemical sector, we constitute 3.4% of the global chemical industry, and we rank 6th in the sales of chemical in the world. And I fully believe that we have the potential to be a global leader in the chemical sales. This sector has a considerable market size. We are having around 170 US dollar billions at present, and it is expected that this market will reach or will cross 300 billion US dollars by 2025. This sector contributes around 9.5% of manufacturing GVA, and it also contributes around 15% to India's exports. The Indian chemical sector has a weightage of 2.54% on index of industrial production. And also, moreover, we employ around 1.56 million people, this sector, I mean. So this is to show to how important, crucial that this chemical sector is. Now coming to the theme and talking about regulations in chemical sector. So first I will just discuss a global scenario or what at present current practices are internationally going on regarding the regulation in chemical sector. So in this regard, European Union initiated the process for regulating the chemicals and they established a process of REACH, registration, evaluation, authorization, restriction of chemicals. It was established in 2006 with the basic purpose to understand the probable hazard that can be posed by a chemical to human health or environment. So that was their basic aim. And under REACH, all the chemicals that are being placed in European territories that need to be registered, or they have to submit the data. All the chemicals need to be registered first by submitting the technical dossier, which contains the data on physical chemical properties as well as the toxicological properties. And then European Chemical Agency evaluates that data, and based on the extent of hazard reflected through the data, they recommended for further restriction or prohibition, all these things. Now, after successful establishment of REACH, major developed countries like USA, Canada, Japan, Australia, they also established a similar structure or similar legislative framework, REACH-like structure in their countries. And advantage was that because through this legislative framework, they were able to, establish a proper inventory management of all the chemicals which are being placed in their territory. They have all the data of all those chemicals. They know the probable hazard that can be posed by them. Similarly, developing countries like Taiwan, Philippines, Thailand, they have also established such type of regulations. Now, one of the advantages is that they have the proper database and inventory management. Other advantages also that, which is most important for industries also, these countries use such regulation as you can say, technical barrier to trade, which gives a competitiveness to domestic industry in comparison to global companies. So their domestic industry is very much enhanced, strengthened because of these regulations. And also there is no spurious ministry after that. Now, present scenario in our country, when we talk about management of chemicals, we have rules regarding safety, as Dr. Amar also while introducing the session, he briefed. Regarding safety, we have good rules and regulations. But regarding management of chemicals, we are lacking. And if we see the present scenario, then we have notified the manufacturer storage and code of hazardous chemicals rules, MSIC rules, 1989 under EPA, Environment Protection Act, in which wherein around 684 chemicals have been listed, and their conditions for safe handling, transportation during manufacturing, storage, all these things are very well defined and prescribed also. Also, we have chemical accident rules under Environment Protection Act, which talks about our preparedness for chemical accident and what steps need to be taken after the accident has occurred. So these rules are also already there. We have also, India has also notified Insecticides Act 1968, where pesticides are being registered or for import, export, or prohibited, all these things. Around 950 pesticides as on date are being registered under this act. So if we see that except these regulations, which covers a very narrow range of chemicals, a wider range of chemicals is lying wide open, being uncovered, or we can say being deregulated. And these chemicals are already being placed in our country, and they are being used. So we need to develop an inventory management for these. We need to know the data and the chemical properties of all those chemicals, which are not covered elsewhere. So, and this also poses a major challenge for us, for our country. So, considering these issues and this, challenges, now to provide regulation for this otherwise deregulated segment of the chemical sector, Department of Chemicals is in the process of finalizing the draft omnibus chemical regulation through draft chemicals management and safety rules. The main aim of these rules are to ensure the high level protection safety for human health and environment from the probable hazard that can be posed by any chemical. These draft rules are proposed to be notified under Environment Protection Act, and it will set up and establish a legislative framework and procedure for notification of all the chemicals, substances, and as well as registration for priority substances. Priority substances are those substances which have been identified based on their hazardous nature, or those substances which are very hazardous in nature. So those will be, scheduled or listed as priority substances. For them, registration will also be required. So with this view and objective, department is already in the process of finalizing the draft of this chemical regulations. As I told, that this rule will provide a proper legislative framework for the inventory management, to have the proper database of all the chemicals which are being placed in Indian territory in our country. This regulation, once implemented, after that it will also provide for registration of priority substances, and among the priority substances or the hazardous substances, based on their evaluation, their data will be evaluated, and based on the extent of risk possessed by these priority substances, it will be recommended either for restriction or prohibition or any other action based on their proved and established data only. So this will take care of both. This will take care of the management part of chemicals. Now, for the safety part, it is proposed that these draft rules will be subsuming two existing rules, which I told earlier, MSIHC rules as well as chemical accident rules, so that it provide an omnibus chemical regulation. The management aspect as well as the safety aspect of the chemicals will be covered under single umbrella, and this will be called as integrated omnibus chemical regulation. Although it is in a draft stage and it is yet to finalize, as on date, we are proposing to exempt these substances, radioactive substances, and then hazardous waste or substances which are covered under any other act or rule. These will be, we are planning to, proposing to exempt. Now, this will how the omnibus chemical regulation look. With these objectives. For major objective is building an inventory, creating a database of all the chemicals present in Indian territory and suggesting risk management measures. Then safety aspect, ensuring safety during manufacturing, handling and transportation of hazardous chemicals. And third is accident preparedness. We will be prescribing the procedures, site safety procedures, so that industry is well aware and they are ready for any unwanted incident, accident preparedness, so that any unwanted incident does not happen, or at least it is minimized. This will how the draft chemical management safety rules will be structured and look. First of all, the building an inventory, the new rules for notification, registration based on the reach. Then on the safety aspect, MSIC rules will be proposed to be subsumed, and the regulation for site safety management based on those inventory of chemicals which will be built, the site safety procedures and all the guidelines and procedures for manufacturing, storage and handling of hazardous chemicals will be prescribed. Then chemical accident preparedness, the chemical accident rules will be subsumed. And for this, again, the rule will provide for the site safety measurements and accident preparedness procedures. Also the after effects. Now, this will be the management part, how it will take place. First step will be the notification, which will be required for all the chemicals. It will require a very nominal data, basic information on the chemical structure. It will then, the substance will be notified. After that, if a substance is a priority substance, is a hazardous substance, and based on its toxicity data, it will have to be get registered. And for registration, we need a detailed data of toxicology. Then after registration, out of this list of priority substances, again, these substances will be evaluated for restriction in use or prohibition based on the extent of hazard posed by them. This will be the key process. First of all, step will be notification of substances. If it is a normal substance, no action required, only the notification will be there. For example, suppose if it is a priority substances, then entire data will be required. It will be go to registration, and after that, it will be evaluated if the data based on the data submitted, if it's really toxic and hazard or extent of hazard is really very high, then it will maybe recommended for restrictions. And for new substance, if there is no data available, then entire data has to be generated. Then it will be evaluated whether it is a hazardous, needs to be included in priority list or not. If it is if it does not, if it needs not to be included in priority list, then there is no action required. It will just notify, and notification, certificate will be given to the manufacturer of the chemical. If it is a hazardous chemical, it needs to be inclusion in the priority list. After the priority list, if it is even the extent of hazard is much higher, then it will be evaluated for further action, for the course of action. So that's the basic idea which I am giving for draft regulation. That's how we are planning to bring it. These are the category that how the notified registered substance will be all, registered will be only the priority, and then which are being placed in the market. Now this is the management part. This is now about the safety part. For safety part, we will be prescribing the measures and the procedures for hazardous chemicals, safety related to hazardous chemicals during their importation, during their transportation, and their on-site industrial activity, whether being manufactured or whether being installed. Similarly, for chemical accident preparedness, we'll have repository of information on chemical accidents. Because of that, when we'll have notification, we have the entire data and chemical properties of those chemicals. We'll have a control room to coordinate for that, and for any emergency and unwanted incident, we'll have a proper procedures. We'll share guidelines to industry so that all the actions are taken in advance to avoid any kind of mishappening and chemical accident. So this was just a brief and short idea and my presentation on the legislative evolving framework, legal framework of the chemical regulation in the chemical sector. However, any question and answer we'll take in the question and answer session. And so just from my side, thank you so much. Again, once again, I would like to thank ICC. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Vishal Chaudhary. I think you've given us a very good overview of the new regulations that is coming up. As you suggest, I think let's wait till the end of the other speakers to open up for questions. So I would now request Mr. N.K. Jain, who is Assistant Vice President, Environmental Excellence in Jubilant Life Sciences. He will be talking about decoding regulatory framework for industrial groundwater utilization. So Mr. N.K. Jain, over to you.
Yeah, is my screen visible?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. And good morning, everybody again. I would like to take you through the groundwater scenario and its regulation in India. The heading of the subject is, as rightly said, decoding regulatory framework, industrial groundwater utilization. All of us are hearing, and we hear surely about many a time saying that the next world war, if it has to happen, it's going to be for water resource. But I am of a firm opinion, even if that war, if it has to happen, India need not participate in that war because of the God's given gift, lots of water resources which we have across India. But unfortunate part is the water which is available as rainfall, only estimated is about 10% of it is what we are able to harvest and utilize. The remaining portion is known to be running away into the seas or it's lost in evaporation. So the rainfalls which brings in lots of water, if it needs to be utilized efficiently, the option allowed or economical option would be, can it be stored below ground? So we avoid a large quantity of water lost in evaporation. Under that scenario, the groundwater regulation becomes a very important subject for the water security of the country and more so for the industry. I will take you through the journey of the groundwater regulation, which has been over there for the last 32 years, and which way are we heading, and how industry's sustainability is under risk if the groundwater is not managed well, and what can we do, or what is the regulatory framework which forces us or encourages us to do what we are supposed to do. I've tried to take this journey in next 20 minutes and hope to cover it at the best. The groundwater regulation in India started in 1998 with the constitution of the Central Groundwater Authority, which came into existence pursuant to a Supreme Court order in a matter, a PAL matter of MC Mehta. And the authority was constituted for the purpose of regulation and control of groundwater and resource development. Since 1998 till 2015, a long 17 years, the groundwater NOC, no objection certificate from the Central Groundwater Authority was required for industrial users only before constructing any new facility for either increased consumption or for a new facility, which means the existence of industries prior to 1998 were exempted from seeking NOC. Nevertheless, also that agriculture, commercial and domestic use were exempted from seeking NOC. The Groundwater Authority, through its officers, through the board, monitors every block across the country, more than about 7,000 blocks, and they categorize them into either safe, semi-critical, critical, or overexploited, and it is assessed in a periodicity. The blocks are classified. The blocks are nothing but the administrative blocks which we have, revenue administrative blocks, and they are categorized depending on the stage of development, which is what is the ratio of groundwater extracted versus what is happening in recharge. Recharge happens because of rainfall, because of agriculture, because of artificial recharge, because of ponds, lakes, whatever is the reason. So there is a recharge which happens and there is extraction which is happening. Net difference will be fluctuating the groundwater table, which is monitored by a network of piezo well across the country. So if a block has got 70% water extracted against recharge, it is safe. If it is between 70 to 90% is semi-critical. If the extraction is 90 to 110% of the recharge, it is critical. And if the extraction is more than 110% of recharge, then it is called overexploited. And if a block continues to be overexploited for 3 monitoring seasons, then it will be declared as notified. A notified area is where no new extraction is allowed and restrictions are imposed on the existing ones. So the same Central Groundwater Authority for over the years have estimated that of the groundwater resources available, more than 85% is extracted and consumed for agricultural activity. The domestic activities require 8 to 9%. So what is left for industry is industry extracts about 7 to 8% of the groundwater resource. And yet the guidelines for last 22 years never considered regulating the agricultural use, which is more than 85% of the requirement or consumption. Not only that, during the past 22 years, the Central Groundwater Authority has delegated the groundwater regulations to the states, where the states have formulated their own groundwater policies and rules. So presently today, the latest adding to the list is Punjab. Just prior to that was Uttar Pradesh. As in all, there are 15 states of India which regulates their own groundwater resources. It was only in October 2015, the Central Groundwater Authority, in compliance with the order of an NGT, revised its guidelines and made it mandatory for all existing operating industries also to seek no objection certificate for extracting groundwater. And in that process, the guidelines stipulated obligation for artificial recharge of rainwater also. In July 2017, in a very important order in the matter of Ganga pollution, Ganga water river pollution, also coming out of a PIL of Mr. MC Mehta, for the segment between Haridwar and Kanpur, which they call it as segment B, the Honorable NGT directed that the groundwater extraction for commercial and industrial use shall be prohibited in critical blocks because they were reportedly found to be harming the ecological flow of the river Ganga, and that further increased the pollution in river Ganga because dilution effect was lost. It also said those who extract groundwater should be paying for it. So the subsequent principal bench of the NGT, it decoded the word prohibition in critical areas and extended the logic that it should be applicable to OCS blocks, that is overexploited, critical as well as semi-critical blocks in 2018. And it also said the authority should regulate the agriculture also. And it also said that the Central Groundwater Authority cannot delegate their authorities to the states because it's a central subject. In addition to this, it makes very caustic observations regarding the recharge program. And it slammed, saying that the recharge program itself is a sham because there is no mechanism to monitor the effectiveness of the recharge and to quantify the beneficial impacts it has given. The CGWA was under pressure to regulate, but they knew Industry is sourcing only 7 to 8% of the groundwater, remaining 92%, which is 85% by the agriculture and about 8 to 9% by the domestic, was not regulated and cannot be regulated because of the social impacts it has. So it thought of giving some relief to the industry by saying in December 2018, it came out with a policy, notified a policy where it said industry shall pay for the water it extracts, and the amount collected so will be used by the state governments in augmenting the groundwater resource or making provision for alternate sources of water for the industrial operation. However, the NGT stayed that operation of that notification, saying that it is washing off the hands by the regulator from regulating, because there was an open check for the industry to extract what they want to extract. So whoever has money can extract anywhere in the country. So that was stayed. During the same course of hearing, the Honorable NGT's direction to the CPCB, the Central Pollution Control Board came up with a formula for imposing environment compensation penalty or monetary compensation to be paid by illegal groundwater users. And that formula considered what was the water consumption, for how many days it has been consumed, and a particular factor for illegality, the rate for illegal extraction. In the process, in the matter of the NGT, the Honorable NGT directed constitution of different committees. Interministerial secretariat committees were constituted, and yet the two committees could not come out with a convincing program with respect to how they would monitor the recharge and conservation programs, addressing the concerns of the intergenerational equity and sustainability, because the groundwater is the resource of a public and it has to address the sustainability of the resource for the future generations. After a lot of struggle with no answers to those questions, because of the mammoth size of the country and the number of users, especially the agriculture and domestic users, increasing urbanization, increasing population, the Central Groundwater Authority finally notified a new guidelines in September 2020. It was more to look at granting relief to industry with the concept of water conservation and water resource charges to be paid and waiving of the need for recharge obligation. Now, if you have a look at these numbers on the screen, during the period 2009 to 2017, 4 different occasions when the Central Groundwater Authority has published the groundwater development status. As you can see, of the 6,881 blocks, the last row, 4,310 are safe, 972 are semi-critical, 313 are critical, and 1,186 are overexploited. What we can see that is the overexploited blocks are increasing, saline blocks are increasing mostly in a faster rate than the number of blocks which has been added, which gives a situation where the groundwater situation is depleting towards unsustainable use. As of today, 162 blocks are notified across the country. But the question is whether this deterioration can be addressed only to the industrial use, when industry uses only about 6 to 8% of the total groundwater resource. Industry pays the highest amounts of charges for groundwater extraction. Industry has highest amount of regulation with respect to any environmental regulations. There are regulators standing on their neck. So, in that case, in that being the case, whether it is or it right to regulate only the industry and not the others. The environment compensation rate calculated by the CPCB, if you look at the bottom table, for an overexploited block, it can go as high as 200 rupees per cubic meter. Such high deterrent factors has been issued to regulate industry's groundwater extraction. for future intergenerational sustainability and equality principles. What are the salient features of the new regulations? The salient features mostly trying to address the issues and concerns raised by the NGT in a matter being heard by that before it. It is a pan-India applicability, and if any states want to regulate their own groundwater, they have to use them as the minimum regulations. They can make it more stringent. A very good case of making it stringent is Uttar Pradesh, where they have gone to the extent of declaring even the critical and overexploited blocks as notified, which means no expansion, no new use of industry and commercial will be allowed in Uttar Pradesh in the blocks that are critical and overexploited. And for records, 128 blocks are already under critical and overexploited, are presently notified. Also, any user who earlier did not have NOC from the Central Groundwater Authority before the UP Groundwater Authority came into existence, now if they apply in those notified areas, their NOC will be rejected. Their application once rejected, they become illegal structures. Once they are illegal structures, then they are either liable to be paying the environment compensation with the amounts which was shared in the previous table, or the district collector is authorized to go and seal those structures. So what does it mean? Which means that in a overexploited block or a critical block where there could be industries, but also there are ample number of agricultural use and domestic urbanization which has taken place, there industry is going to be stopped from extracting groundwater. The online process, all applications shall be online. Agriculture and MSME with less than 10 KLD is exempted. Group housing with more than 20 KLD, they have made sewage treatment plant mandatory and reuse that water. In spite of all this, on record, agriculture sector is completely exempted. While they say more than 85% of the agriculture are small agricultures with less than 2 acres of landholding pattern, they have not bothered to regulate even the large, middle and larger ones. 9.18% of the landholders have 4 to 10 hectares and 3% of the holding is more than 10 hectares. At least they could have started imposing some regulations in agricultural sector to this middle and large category. If not regulate, at least register. All commercial units require NOC, and a commercial unit is defined as any industry, any infrastructure, or any mining. The CGWA or the State Groundwater Authority shall engage independent agencies for verifying compliance. They have a host of mandatory requirements imposed in the NOC that shall be now monitored by independent agencies. As I said, no new industries in overexploited blocks. In addition to that, they have imposed all industries drawing more than 100 KLD shall mandatorily undertake water audit and achieve 20% reduction in water consumption in over 3 years period. More than 10 KLD drawing institutes and organizations shall install piezo wells for level monitoring, flow meters, and rainwater harvesting structures have been made mandatory. As I said, no recharge obligation, just pay water abstraction, water restoration fees as applicable. For those who have already constructed prior to this notice date, is this notification, they have given a 50% rebate in water extraction fees. They have added a chapter on groundwater impact assessment is mandatory, and socio-economic impacts due to groundwater depletion is also mandatory for more than 100 KLD users in OCS block. These are some of the provisions they have made to assuage the concerns of the NGT. Whether they are effective, we will try to see in the further slides. So, the revenue generated from the blocks by way of water conservation and water extraction fees is supposed to be deposited with the state government, which is expected to invest that money into making provision for alternate water sources or augment the water resources of the groundwater aquifer. So the mindset of the regulatory framework is industry is the mother of all problems with groundwater depletion, or should you say industry is the favorite punching bag and soft targets for all other sins. So the groundwater extraction charges range from 1 rupee per meter cube to an upper limit of 10 rupees per meter cube. And for overexploited block, that 1 rupee becomes 6 rupee and the 10 becomes 20 rupees. So these are the charges to be paid upfront for the quantities which are in the NOC to the state regulator. If the extraction is lower than what is there in the NOC, the additional amounts paid shall be adjusted at the time of renewal based on actual consumption, because the flow meter with telemetry is mandatorily imposed in the NOC conditions. There is a separate section which imposes mandatory conditions on every groundwater extraction. There is a separate section 11 where renewal of NOC is dealt with. And one good thing is, once an application for renewal is filed 90 days prior to the expiry of the earlier NOC, then it would be deemed approved unless found not complying and rejected by the groundwater authority. Section 13 provides powers to the district magistrate and SDM, subdivisional magistrate, to seal illegal wells, disconnect electrical supply, or launch even prosecution.
Mr. Jain, I just wanted to remind you that you have probably 2 minutes left.
I am closing them within quickly. The last 3 slides. These are the kind of penalties which are going to be imposed in case of non-compliance to the NOC conditions. They are very deterrent in factors. So, what is the caution for the industry? That's the whole subject, and this is the last slide. Industry, as we industry champions, we must take groundwater resource constraint as a serious sustainability concern and accord adequate priority for its management. There are a host of consultants who are in the market, who are going to be accredited. In spite of their accreditation, my personal experience says a large majority of them just follow conventional methods of copy-paste. So industry should give enough priority in identifying and engaging with consultants with practical knowledge on groundwater resource, because this is presently assumed free in this country. So that mentality has to change. Most of us do not know the lithology of the area where we are drawing groundwater, because that is very important for the designing of bore wells, piezo wells, recharge structures. So kindly, we should look into engaging, getting this information and correct our structures and thereafter regularly maintain them. The rainwater harvesting structures, once constructed, we believe it is fit and forget. No, that requires regular monitoring, measurement. It will require periodic revival, because choking of these perforated pipes, which are the source through which route for recharge, has very high potential for choking. So reviving the existing recharge structures is also important. That's why you can see a very huge amount deterrent prohibitory values are there, which are being imposed for non-functional structures. So we must have a program to regularly monitor them. Very rarely I have seen in my career where people get a practical assessment of actual recharge potential of a structure constructed. So kindly, industry should look at undertaking infiltration test through the rainwater harvesting structures which has been designed to really see whether it's going to recharge the quantities which we want to. As I said in the point number 2, most consultants are conventional copy-paste. Nobody does this, so we need to ask for it. It costs money. But if we don't do it, then it's a huge penalty now. No contaminated water should enter into the recharge structure. It has got very high penalties to be imposed. Anyway, it is ethically incorrect also. Impact assessments of groundwater and water audits needs to be taken very seriously with an intention to conserve and reduce water consumption, as well as plan proper actions for mitigating the risks in case the impact assessment shows depleting groundwater. That's very, very important for us to look at it as part of sustainability. The last 2 points. We have been talking a lot, we have been doing a little, but we need to enhance our investment towards water conservation. Also, another important action that comes out is whether there are alternate sources of water around us other than groundwater. Whether it is community sewage, saline water, the neighboring industries waste which can become my resource, alternate technologies, all these things needs focus and funds allotted to ensure that we have a sustainable source of water. In short, one underlining is monitoring of our action towards groundwater resource conservation, protection and augmentation is going to be a serious matter which needs urgent attention and action. But another important point is the matter is still before the Honorable NGT. We are not too sure whether this new notification will stand the scrutiny of the NGT and will pass through, or it will be stricken down again for further stringent provisions. With this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Jain, absolutely wonderful, very lucid presentation on the situation. Thank you very much for your insights. Now I have the pleasure to invite Mr. Joe Phelan, Country Director of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Over to you, Joe.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Raman, and thanks to all at the Indian Chemical Council and my fellow panelists. I'm going to try to share my screen. So let's see how this goes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to present a little bit about regulatory, about sustainability frameworks that are driving and will certainly continue to drive regulation for the chemical sector and others. Let's see if I'm able to do this. Okay, so I think I haven't, I think I don't have permission, so let me speak instead. So my name is Joe Phelan, and I lead the work of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development here in India. We're a global organization, and we work with more than 200 of the world's largest companies. They represent all different sectors and geographies. Some of India's largest corporate houses are our members. But we span the globe and all sectors, but we're united around a common vision, which is of creating a world in 2050 where more than 9 billion people are all living well and within planetary boundaries. And as a group of companies, they understand that the way that we do business today isn't sustainable and won't allow that vision to be achieved. So necessarily our business practices and operations will change and transform, as will the regulatory environment in which we operate. And in the chemical sector, you know, it's one which is affected a lot by regulation and is, you know, high up the kind of scrutiny list from government and regulators. So you understand this very well. The Sustainable Development Goals were agreed by the world's governments in 2015, with India central to the development of these goals and really helping to champion them. And they set common targets for the world to achieve by 2030. Prime Minister Modi was at the launch of these goals, and India recognizes that it has a major role to play in the delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals. There are estimates that the progress globally, 50% of the progress globally will take place in India. So it's a very important agenda. And our member companies view the Sustainable Development Goals as a framework which sets out the direction that global governments or governments around the world will be targeting their policies, their incentive frameworks, public spending, and as a result, the way that private finance is targeted too. So the companies that we work with, use them very much as a way to understand how the business operating environment will change over the next decade, and to understand what the opportunities are for them and what the risks are. We responded to the Business and Sustainable Development Commission, which said that companies in all sectors would benefit from developing detailed roadmaps to guide their sector's shift to sustainable development in line with the goals. And so almost 3 years ago, we launched a framework for road mapping progress to the SDGs, which could be applicable across industries and geographies. And that framework was a collaborative effort with the company ERM, which I think everyone here would be familiar with. And we piloted the effort with chemical sector members from our membership. So this is an area where the chemical sector has led. And today we have produced 3 Sdg sector roadmaps. The chemical sector was the first, and we have 3 more in progress. So the 3 that have been completed, there's one for the chemical sector, which was developed with Solvay, DSM, with Dow, Covestra, Evonik, Sumitomo Chemical, Sabic, AkzoNobel, and Mitsubishi Chemical, and ERM were our consulting partner. We've also developed one for the forest sector, where the Aditya Birla Group were one of the leading companies involved with that, along with other global players. And the third one that we've developed is an SDG roadmap for the India cement sector. And this is the only national roadmap that we've developed, and it reflects both the significance of India to the SDGs, and the leadership and willingness to work together of the Indian cement sector. And so that came out in 2019. And so companies like ACC, Ultratech, Ambuja, Dalmia, the companies you would expect, nine in all, work together on that. And they found that very useful as a starting point for dialogue with their relevant ministries about the SDGs and how they can contribute to delivery in India and the policies that would support that. We have 3 more in development, one with IPICA, the International Petroleum Association, one on electric utilities, where Tata are one of 11 companies that are active in the development of that, and one with the tire industry. But I'm going to speak about the chemical sector roadmap and share some insights from that for you. And the point of these roadmaps is that they provide a vision and a platform for action-focused collaboration by businesses together and with regulators and with other important stakeholders. So they set a common vision. They map the current SDG impact of each sector, and they explore opportunities for impact, and they identify actions that companies can take.
Joe, excuse me.
Sure.
Can you try sharing the screen once again, please?
Sure, I'll do that. So it's saying that I don't have permission, or maybe I haven't allowed permissions to do that.
You have been made the co-host so that you have the permission.
Okay. So it's not letting me do that. I apologize. I can share this presentation with all the participants afterwards, or I can share it with you at the ICC to share with all participants.
Then you share the presentation, and then we'll circulate it to all the viewers and everyone who is registered, and we'll put up on our site as well. So sorry for this.
Yeah, my apologies. So these roadmaps allow businesses to enhance their license to operate, to manage risks, risks from future regulation, risks from stakeholder expectation, changing legal responsibilities, and also crucially allows companies to explore new growth markets. Because if you can understand where each country and each market is looking to develop, then you can understand how your business can be part of that sustainable growth and success. So what we did
Sorry
with
to
the...
interrupt you again. Can you please switch on your video, please?
So my video is on. Am I not showing?
Joe, we
Am I-
can't see. No, we can't
Okay.
see. Suggest you continue, unfortunate, yeah.
Okay. Am I visible now? So I see you, Dr. Raman. I see you on screen, and I see me. I see me in the corner.
Mr. Mishra, can you see Joe now? No, Joe.
Oh, I can't see Joe. No. Maybe you can continue and
Shall I try and log out? Shall I try and log out and log in again? Let's see if that works.
Joe, I think let's continue. Maybe once you finish, then you can log out and join back in for any questions to be taken. Yeah.
Sure. And I apologize to everyone on the line.
Not a problem.
Okay. Okay. So what the SDG roadmap for the chemical sector does is first assesses the current level of impact of the chemical sector with the SDGs throughout the value chain. It identifies the most significant opportunities for transformative contributions to the Sustainable Development Goals, and it outlines key actions and partners for the industry in the short, medium, and long term to deliver meaningful impact. The first chapter shows where the impact is. The chemical sector, you are the solution providers, and you contribute to have a very big potential for positive and negative impact across 8 of the Sustainable Development Goals, from no hunger to life below water, climate change, affordable and clean energy, responsible consumption, right across all of those. But getting more granular, it shows that the report shows that you have impact opportunities in 18 opportunity areas across the themes of food, water, people and health, energy, infrastructure, and cities. And these are tied into 23 of the Sustainable Development Goals, 169 targets. So it does get quite granular and show that, because the SDGs are such a comprehensive framework with 169 targets, one of the useful things this does is show the 23 targets where, as an industry, you can have the greatest opportunity for impact is. The third section of the SDG roadmap then sets out impact pathways, and it sets out 23 actions that the chemical sector can take to drive impact across these areas and these 5 systemic themes. So there's a lot of information available, and what it does is both set out the direction that governments and societies are going to develop over the next 10 years. But crucially, it sets out where you as an industry are having impact and where you can scale that up, and which organizations you can best do that. And so it's a very important tool for you to put into your own strategy work and to use in your corporate affairs and your your engagements with civil society and other stakeholders. It's available on our website. I'll put the link in the chat, but it's sdgroadmaps.wbcsd.org, and there are other resources for the chemical sector there and on SDGs too. And I think I just have 2 minutes left. So what I would also say is that these SDGs are, a crucial framework for the chemical sector to understand the evolving landscape in which you're operating. And we were very pleased to work with ERM on the development of this roadmap, and please look at that. But there's another important framework which we don't have time to discuss today, but could form the basis of future discussions with you, which is the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And this is a G20 initiative. Again, India's a very important part of the G20, as you know, to improve the quality of information related to financial risk held by companies and improve the flow of that information to financial markets. And that is driving change in the reporting and disclosure requirements for businesses around the world. And there's some important resources for the chemical sector there as well. And so I encourage you to consider that and do research on that, and perhaps that can be the basis of future discussions. So for now, I'll end there, and I'll put links to these resources in the chat. And I know that our friends at the ICC will share the presentation shortly.
Joe, thank you very much. I think that really connects the SDG to some of the action that the chemical industry can take, and I think we'll come back to that. Let me open this forum up for questions. Mr. Mishra, how do we plan? Can we take questions? Are there participants asking questions? Any suggestions, or do I kickstart a discussion with the panelists here?
Raman, you kindly pick the questions and ask to the panelists. We have, of course, Dr. Vishal Chaudhary had to leave because he was called by the secretary. So he said that subsequently he'll share the answers. But yeah, to the other two panelists, you can raise the question, but he said that he'll answer it in writing later.
Okay. Are the participants, do they have any questions?
The participants have shared their questions in the chat box.
Okay, there are about a few. I think there was one question, very valid question, which is when do we expect the draft CMS rules to come into effect? I guess Dr. Vishal Chaudhary will respond to that. I have a few questions for Dr. Vishal as well. I'm a bit ignorant on this side, but I would like to know were there industry experts involved in conceiving this draft CMS rules, or when will industry input be taken into this is a question that I had. Would somebody from the forum ICC take down these questions so we can give it to Dr. Vishal?
Yeah, just as an input also, Department of Chemicals and Petrochemicals had shared the draft rules, and it was circulated to all the industry member companies of ICC. So we have submitted in terms of point-wise comments on the draft rules. And in one of the discussions in the ministry that we had with the Additional Secretary, Mr. Samir Biswas, his point was that they have already had about 4 consultations, but I'm sure there's always a time to give our inputs in terms of the draft regulations that is there.
Okay, yeah, I think that is good to know, but it does look like a very comprehensive kind of regulation that is coming in, which will also cover all chemicals that are currently not being included in any of the acts. Yeah, so to that extent, I guess, but we need to make sure that it is a forward-looking regulation and not a very restrictive regulation.
Expect another, perhaps a round of discussions before it is actually notified.
Yeah. Now, for Mr. N.K. Jain, I appreciate, you obviously have a very in-depth understanding of this area and the irony or the inconsistency that only about 8-9% of the entire groundwater is being regulated, and there is so much regulation around it, when the 92% is not being regulated or there is no thinking about it. Obviously, that is that's something in the context of the objective to increase manufacturing in the country, Atmanirbhar, etc. This regulation obviously perhaps is a little bit counterproductive. However, I think you also make a very good conclusion that we do have a responsibility to ensure that groundwater is exploited properly. I like the way that you have really made recommendations on how an industry can go about thinking about it, hiring the right consultants, making sure that setting up the RWH is not good enough. It needs maintenance. So quite a number of very, very valuable points that you have brought about. Where do you think this is going? And I think your final statement was that this might still change. It might become even more restrictive if NBT does not agree to this. So what's your prognosis on this?
My view on this is the regulation, the way it has been notified now, still does not answer the major questions raised by the NGT. And it is true in the sense there is no regulation of the 92% user or at least the 85% of the agricultural user, nor there is a plan in place how to utilize this money to augment the groundwater resource from where the money has been collected. So my worry would be draw money from Noida and invest in Bundelkhand. So the industries in Noida will continue to suffer. So one of the important thing, another bigger mistake which has happened in this, in my opinion, gap in this notification is, suppose you go to a cluster of industry where there are 50 industries drawing different quantities of groundwater. How does somebody do a real impact assessment? Who knows what my neighbor is drawing? So instead of leaving it to the industry to get it done through consultants who would not know what the data there, the authority should have kept the responsibility with them to do a real assessment at the cost of money paid by us. Number one. Number two, can there not be a provision in this notification, the water conservation fee which I am required to deposit directly to the government and let them do what they want to do? Instead, allow me to invest in to increase the efficiency of my competing users. I can use it for improving the agricultural water use efficiency under my CSR without cutting into CSR budget. I can help water conservation measures to be improved by my competing users and my own use. So if we have to act fast, then the action has to be happening in multiple levels and not that everything government will do. No, but we all of us know to what extent an agricultural user can be touched. So I see that we are going towards bad to worse with this policy. And that's why the cautions which I have listed in the last slide, which you repeated, is very important that we do this in our own interest, because today it is the most neglected area by the industry champions. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. I think that is profound, very useful. Let me move on to Joe. And I was really excited that WBCSD actually worked with chemical industries and developed a roadmap for the chemical industry. And you talked about 18 opportunity areas and 23 targets. So one question that I have is, and about 23 actions. Are these actions generic actions that any other company can adopt, or are they very specific to certain industry segment or certain companies? Could you comment on that, Joe?
Sure. So I'm checking I'm audible but not visual. Is that not visible? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Still not visible.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry for that. So these are actions that can be taken by the chemical sector. We understand, and as you know very well, the chemical sector is one of the more diverse sectors. There is less uniformity in who can take actions than there would be, for example, for the electric utilities sector or for the cement sector. But nevertheless, these are a common set of actions identified for the chemical sector, and steps that can be taken as individual companies and through collaborative action. So, some of them, for example, are about engagement with policymakers and asking for certain, regulatory frameworks. Some of them are about where there's direct investment in R&D, and some of them are around collaborative action. So this is a set of actions for the chemical sector to manage risk and crucially to scale up and drive access to new markets.
Okay, thank you, Joe. I have one more question to you, which is, what is the incentive for companies to join your initiative and take up, let's say, the roadmap that you have prescribed? What benefits would companies accrue from it? Because I see that the number of companies that you mentioned, most of them are fairly large companies and multinational companies, whereas chemical industry also has a lot of mid-sized companies. And is there a real value for such company to, let's say, join WBCSD, or at least, look at this roadmap very seriously?
Yeah. So, first of all, as an organization, we do research led by our member companies, and then we put it in the public domain. And so, all of our materials, once developed, are available, and they're very relevant for mid-sized chemical businesses because they're designed by some of the leading companies in the world, not exclusively, but they're designed by business for business, looking at how to bring the strengths of business and market-based solutions to the challenges of sustainable development, and how to succeed and be more successful through being more sustainable. So these are resources, that are available. In terms of the benefit of being a member, so, please take advantage of these resources. I think that companies find benefit in being a member through the following reasons. The first is being at the table to help to shape some of the frameworks and make sure that
Have we lost Joe? Mr. Mishra, I can't hear Joe anymore. Can you?
No, I can't hear him. So I don't know what happened. You've lost Joe.
We may have lost him.
So maybe Dr. Raman, if you can continue with your remarks.
I think I saw one question in the chat panel, which is $1 million question, which is how can we stop accidents? Frequent chemical industrial accidents can be avoided in India. I think a culture of safety, investments into ensuring that there is proper design, investment into resources that understand process safety. These are all standard measures that can definitely reduce, these accidents, and perhaps most importantly, a culture of safety, because it has been established that 80 to 90% of all the accidents that happen in the chemical industry actually happens due to unsafe behavior or unsafe act, and not because of unsafe situations. So if we can change the culture, which is of course a huge challenge, because we do jaywalking on the road, we don't use the indicator, we drive the car and come into the factory, and we expect people to completely switch. So there is a need for an overall change, and that only can reduce. So with that response, let me quickly conclude. I think this was an excellent session. We, as participants of the industry, I think we need to be very actively involved with the Ministry of Department of Chemicals and Petrochemicals to ensure that the new guidelines is forward-looking, facilitates good, responsible players to thrive, and also subsumes some of the older regulations, so we don't have a proliferation of regulations around. We also heard from Mr. Jain about the situation with groundwater and the need for all industry participants to start seriously taking this into account and taking groundwater exploitation into account, And lastly, we heard Joe about, for example, how organizations like WBCSD can support the chemical industry to align our goals with the goals of sustainable development and thereby really serve a larger purpose in what we are doing. So I want to thank all the speakers for their excellent contribution, and I also want to thank ICC for this opportunity to chair and co-chair this session. So thank you very much, and back to you, Mr. Mishra.
Thank you, Dr. Raman. It was indeed so many questions, so many issues of this session. And as we say on safety, it's always a journey. It's never an achievement of a goal. So ICC will continue with the member companies on this journey. We will be interacting with the government in terms of getting the rules right. But it's not just a question of getting rules right. It needs to be getting it internalized right by all the member companies that are going to implement them. And thank you, Joe. We are going to take your presentation and share it with all the participants. And so that in terms of achieving working towards the SDG goals, the chemical industry will always be in the forefront. And this is one of the reasons why we have this conference, and we have so many participants with such illuminating and knowledgeable, and sometimes leaving us with issues that we need to follow up after the conference. And ICC will continue to work and follow up on the issues raised over here and share with the member companies the way forward. So thank you, Dr. Raman, for your very, very valuable time. We are indeed very grateful to you.